Hi everyone, I'm Ashleigh Sorensen. I am a psychotherapist, trauma specialist, and director of Psyche and Soma Psychotherapy in Fullerton, California. I am here for episode 2 of our trauma series, and today I will be spending a few minutes discussing what is trauma, or answering the question, what is trauma? And before we get into that, I just want to invite you to notice what happens for you when you just hear the word trauma. For some people, it can be a scary word. For some people, they notice they get activated, something starts bubbling up for them. Some people are like, ooh, I don't want to think about it, don't want to talk about it, don't want to know about it. So I just want to invite you to notice any sensations, feelings, thoughts that come to you when I even say the word trauma. And part of these discussions that I'd like to have is to kind of disempower that word trauma, take away some of its power so that it's not an activating word, and hopefully just to educate, because I think education can bring a lot of awareness. It can help calm, or it can help with understanding, and to also, I guess, I don't know what the word would be, to just normalize, or I don't know what the word is, but I just want to help people understand that trauma doesn't have to be this big scary thing that happened, and I want to get more clear about what trauma is. So before I get started on the different types of trauma, I have a couple quotes by Peter Levine, who is the founder of Somatic Experiencing, which has been found to be really helpful in working with trauma survivors. With trauma, anytime something traumatic has happened, we go into fight, flight, and freeze mode as a way to protect ourselves. And his program, his way of working through trauma, helps people get reconnected to their bodies, which is the somatic part, somatic body experiencing, to stay grounded, stay present, to help them engage and live lives as fully as possible without always having to be in survival mode. So this quote really hit home with me when I started my somatic experiencing training, and it was just, it kind of opened some new doors for me. So I'll share it. Trauma is an internal straitjacket created when a devastating moment in time is frozen. It stifles the unfolding of being and strangles our attempts to move forward with our lives. It disconnects us from ourselves, others, nature, and spirit. When overwhelmed by threat, we are frozen in fear, as though our instinctive survival energies were all dressed up with no place to go. So I think that's a perfect description of what trauma can do and what happens when we've gone through something traumatic or adverse and we have no resources, no support, other than our survival instincts. So I'll post that in the information or the description below in case anyone wants to read that. I think it's really powerful and a very common description for what happens when people get stuck. And then another quote that he has that I really think is powerful and gives some more information to what trauma and trauma responses are is, he says, traumatic symptoms are not caused by the event itself. So Peter Levine believes that it's not actually the event that is traumatic, but they arise when residual energy from the experience is not discharged from the body. So if that fight, flight, or freeze energy gets stuck in there and it has nowhere to go, that's what causes trauma symptoms. This energy remains trapped in the nervous system, where it can wreak havoc in our bodies and minds. So I think that's a great place to start, is that trauma isn't the event itself. It's when we have no outlet, we have no resources and support to help that survival energy work through, and then it just gets stuck. It lives in our bodies and affects, again, ourselves, our relationships, our work life. It affects fun and play. It affects our sexual lives, our spiritual lives, our creativity, because we're always responding or reacting in a survival sort of style. So, with that being said, I'd love to learn from you if this is any new information or a new way of viewing trauma, that it's actually not the event itself, but the energy that gets stuck in the body is what causes the traumatic symptoms. And another part of this video that I'd like to start exploring is different types of trauma. What can happen to cause traumatic symptoms? So in our culture, I think most of us are aware that like big traumatic events or one-time incidents like going into combat, getting into a car wreck, rape, natural disaster, losing your home in a natural disaster. What else might be a big T? A divorce, losing a loved one. These are all kind of one-time incidents that are very big T traumas. I think that we're more familiar with, that in some ways are easier to talk about because we know, like our logical mind knows this thing happened. But then we also have these little T traumas that aren't as obvious. They tend to be more chronic and ongoing, more lifelong, and our conscious minds aren't always aware that these events are trauma-inducing. So some examples would be living with an alcoholic parent, growing up having an alcoholic parent who couldn't tend to your emotional or physical needs. It could be having a mom or any parent who was depressed and was very much in a depressive state for most of your upbringing, who couldn't attune and pay attention and be present with you. That can be traumatic to a child. Another small T trauma is ongoing sexual abuse by a family member or a close family friend, where no one was talking about it. It was ongoing for a long time. Poverty can be living in poverty, living in our political climate. Depending on your experience, some of these can be big T traumas and some can be small T traumas. And when I say small T, it doesn't dismiss that it was less important or it doesn't make it less important. It doesn't dismiss what happened. It just means that it was chronic and ongoing and not as direct, not as upfront, and sometimes not as conscious or aware. We would say that it's implicit memory, where we might know in our gut, we might know on a physical level that something happened, but our conscious brain may not make sense of it quite yet. So the small T traumas are what I love working with in therapy, to help bring some of that into awareness and to work through it. Let's see. And also a lot of people think, or come in to me saying, oh, like my parents were fine, my family was good. And then down the road, we learn that maybe a parent or both parents were working all the time to provide food, shelter, clothing, all the things it takes to live in the US or live anywhere, to provide for their families on a financial basis. But they really missed out on the emotional connection, having time to play with their parents, sometimes being left alone to do their homework, to feed themselves, things that kids shouldn't necessarily need to be worrying about early on in life. Those are all skills that they learn along the way, but if a parent is always away at work, they're kind of left alone to figure it out themselves, and that is also a form of trauma. and can affect the adult self and adult relationships. So those are just some examples. They're really common in my practice, and I see these things happening all the time, and sometimes people don't realize that they have been through something traumatic, but I think we all have, because people are imperfect and people can't meet everyone's needs all the time. Yeah, so that's, I think that feels like a good spot to land today. Just giving you some more information about what trauma actually is, that it's not the event itself, but that energy, being alone in that energy and not having any place for it to go. Sometimes it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then we go into this like really aggressive fight mode. We might go into like staying distracted, staying really busy flight mode and avoiding the pain, or we might go into a freeze mode where we just shut down because fight or flight didn't work. So we just shut down, we become numb to everything, we might dissociate. And we'll get into all those different stress responses in next episodes, but I appreciate you being here, and please join in on the discussion. Feel free to share. If any of this information was helpful to you, please like and subscribe so that you can stay connected and we can learn more. All right, I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.